Please listen carefully.
Welcome back to the Focus Target Podcast. This is your host, Captain Smiley. With me today, Van and Shy. Been a couple weeks, gentlemen. How's it been?
Up,
Good.
buddy.
Well, we are back today with our podcast. We're going to spend most of today's show talking about the Disney Plus episode Kenobi, or Disney Plus series, I should say, limited series, Kenobi. So if you're interested in some more Star Wars talk, we are here for it. Um, we're also going to do a little bit of a 2022 NHL draft recap since the draft just happened the other night, and we're on the precipice of free agency. So we'll see how long that how much that cuts into our Kenobi discussion. And of course, we always have the question of the day here on the Focus Target podcast. So for today's question of the day, last time, if you can remember all the way back to whatever it was, three or so weeks ago, we discussed immortality was our topic. And so my question for you today is related to that, and that is, if you were given the choice today to pick how many years you would like to live, what would your choice be? How long would you live for if you could be given the choice of any amount of years? Earth rotations. It's up to you. You could live in, just to add a couple dimensions to it, and you can uh if you had a different answer coming in, that's fine. But let's say you would keep your current physical attributes. You wouldn't like get decrepit after 80 years. Like, you'd stay in good health
But you can
and
get better though, right? Like you can work out and get healthier.
yeah, you get
No,
better, but
you're stuck.
you would basically stop aging, right? Like, you would stop aging until.
Because that would change my results if it was like this body, or can I get better?
That's fair. That's a fair point. Let's say that your maybe we put it like this. What if we said your aging went based on the timeline a little bit more? Like, if you
Okay.
say I live 1,000 years, you would still age, but you would age at a normal lifespan's
Yeah,
rate.
so 800 would be like 80. You're
Yeah,
80 years
yeah,
old.
yeah. Fair, fair,
What,
fair, fair. Okay.
what if you then, in that moment, reverted to the
There we
state of
go.
being you would be on the gradient? So, as you know,
So,
37-year-old, all of a sudden you're a
that's how you
baby.
die. Is like, you're cool, and then you hit that 1,000-year mark, and now your body turns 1,000 years old. And
No. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying what you're saying,
oh,
but right now we're adults. But like I'm 37. I say I want to live 1,000 years. All of a
oh,
sudden, poof, I'm a baby,
now,
and
now
like
you're a baby.
developing. Again, I'm
No, I
at
don't.
what
I
You would
don't think
be
37.
we'll
you
go
would
that
be
way.
3 years old, 3.7 years old if you did 1,000 years.
With the mind of
What if I choose?
37 year old.
What if I choose that I want to die tomorrow? Will I age like 60 years in the
Ooh, by
span
the
of a
minute?
day?
Why would you
Yeah.
pick that? Why would you choose that?
Is that your answer?
No, I'm just just playing with the idea, playing with the concept. All right, well, let's get some answers. Shy, let's start with you.
I think how about 90? Let's say 90 years.
A ripe old age of 90 years old.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think I'll be ready to die when I hit 90.
Fair. What about you,
You
Vansky?
don't want to stay like just a little bit older to kind of see what's going on? I
I
feel
don't
like we're on the
know.
precipice of like another like amazing revolution in technology and advancements in science and all that stuff.
A horrible tragedy of mankind where, we kill
So,
each other and
Or that.
perform
Bob's
Or
more
that.
optimistic
atrocities.
than I am. I'll give you
Yeah,
that.
that's
So,
probably but those aren't, I mean, you can have both, right? You can have the horrible tragedy of mankind and advances in science at the same time. Um I was thinking more like 500 years. I think that's a pretty good amount. 4 or 500 years. I think I could pretty much do everything I want in 4 or 500 years.
Fair.
I think after that you're just being greedy.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna take a cop out answer. Mine would be, you know, one day before whatever, however old my wife is. Do the math between us and subtract a day, so that, or put it at the same time, so that whenever she goes, I go with her.
yeah,
Uh, that way I don't have to live without my wife
that's
and
not a
Go to the
cop
have
same
out
her
day
answer.
then.
without me.
Just do the same
Not the
moment,
day
same
before.
instant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same moment.
Yeah,
Maybe
the
that's
same day before sounds like you're an asshole. Like
well,
you
I
want her
tried.
to
Yeah,
suffer for a
yeah,
day.
yeah.
No,
It's like
no,
you're not having to suffer her going away, but then she has to
no, no.
suffer losing you. So yeah, it's
I was
not.
just trying to do it from like a mathematical perspective, but yeah, sure.
Uh,
No, if we can say if you'll allow that, I'm good with that. So and if whenever that is, I'm ready to roll.
we're merciful. We're merciful, deity Smiley. You can have that. Yeah.
You know, and that's I'm hoping that that's a good many years down the road for my children's sake. But you know. All right. Well, that was good. That was good. Good little question today because we got a packed house today. If you would like to submit an idea for a question of the day, if you'd like to tell us how many years you would like to live if given the choice, or why our answers were awesome or terrible, we would love to hear from you. Focus Target Podcast at gmail.com. Best way to reach us. Send us your fan mail, send us your hate mail. We'd love to hear from you.
You can
All
tell us
right.
how many years you want us to live.
Yeah, how many years do you want us to? That'd be interesting to hear. I'd love to hear about that. Okay, NHL draft recap. Shy, I want you to take this one away.
All
We'll
right.
go rapid.
I'm going to do my best announcer voice. And in the 2022 NHL draft, the Seattle Kraken select at the number 4 pick, Shane Wright. Ah! Yeah, so I think maybe of the, not that I've read a lot of draft coverage, a lot of the good stuff is behind paywalls, and I just don't, I can't subscribe to everything out there. But in fact, I don't subscribe to any hockey stuff right now. But I
I
think
can't subscribe to everything, and by not everything, I mean nothing.
nothing. I've been tempted by the Athletic because the Athletic
I
seems
can't do
like it
everything.
has. The Athletic seems like it has some good hockey coverage stuff, and that's the one that honestly. So Corey Pronman, who I think is like their main hockey editor or writer, he did a mock draft that had basically Uri Slafkovsky going number 1, and I think he may have gotten Nemec right as well. Like, well, he didn't get 2 and 3. One of them he got right, but then he had Shane Wright going to Kraken at 4, and a lot of people were like, "No way, this is ridiculous! Like, you're way too out of left field." But
I didn't expect it.
I don't know that anyone did. I mean, there were rumblings, and I know you said we're going to do rapid fire. There were rumblings that he'd been. For anyone who's not familiar with hockey or didn't follow the draft, like Shane Wright for like the last couple of years has been kind of the big
Prize
name from this draft. And one of the reasons was he was given exceptional status as a player to play for the OHL at like 15 years old, which like another notable player who got that recognition was Connor McDavid. And so like he potentially that could be a sign of a really good player, and I guess he's played well, but then I guess he didn't play the year of COVID, which a lot of teams were not happy. Like he was hoping to play in the OHL, and I guess the OHL didn't play that year, and he didn't play overseas. I guess some players went and played like in European leagues that year, and he didn't. And a lot of teams thought that was like non-competitive of him, like he doesn't have the hunger. And then I think this last year he had good numbers, but they weren't great. And so there's all this stuff where I guess he lost stock, and the Kraken won out. Like I'm not going to complain. I think we got a great player, and I'm excited. So.
I think in every sports league, like the draft is like the most overanalyzed, overthought things, and that's why you see sometimes great players slip. And like sometimes you get it right, and the number one player is a stud, but a lot of times you can go down that draft list, and the top 10 players in the draft are not like a lot of people do like redrafts later. They'll go back and say, let's redraft the 2013 draft, knowing what we know now about these players who you would have taken. And
Yeah.
a lot of times the guys that you're taking are not the dudes who were taken right at the top because
Yeah.
people overthink things. And I mean, there's always a level of uncertainty when you're talking about drafting, kids at this point. But I mean, yeah, I would have been excited. I mean, it reminds me of Cale Makar getting picked by the Avs with the number 4 pick the year that they were the worst team in the league. They had the highest odds to get the top pick. They got hosed in the draft lottery and fell all the way as far as they could, not just to 3, but to 4 because it was I think the Vegas entry into the league. They got the automatic 3rd pick. So the Avs, which would have had 3, ended up getting pushed to 4, and they still walked away with Cale Makar, which ended up being, in my opinion, the best of the top 4 players taken. So
Yeah.
sometimes that happens. Like sometimes 4 can be a lucky spot.
Shane Wright, the next Cale Makar. You heard it here first.
Well, we'll see. He's an offensive.
He's a center. Yeah. Yeah.
That is good. He's defenseman, but. Fan, did you do anything notable from the Golden Knights in the draft?
We didn't do much. and the Golden Knights. Our earliest draft pick was 48, I think. We picked up a ton of forwards, a goalie, and one defensive man out of I think the 6 picks that we made throughout the whole entire thing. So, but again, the Golden Knights are just in a different position where they're not building at all. We're happy with the team we have. Now we just need everybody to stay healthy and see what they do this season. But we're pretty confident in the team we got. So they didn't need to do much. They did get a couple out there, and we'll see if they get any ice time next year.
Yeah, Avs were in a similar boat. They came into the draft with not picking until the third round. Then they traded their third and fifth picks and didn't pick till the sixth round. So they had a 6 and a 7, which with they got a defenseman and a goalie. But like when you're picking in the sixth and seventh round, you're just kind of taking flyers at that point and hoping somebody's going to
Yeah.
have a developmental increase. But I guess both of the guys they took were considered, were guys people were kind of that said, hey, those are good picks for where they are in the draft. Um, so yeah, well, we'll have some more. We'll probably have some more updates as we go through the summer with free agency and see kind of how that goes. As obviously that starts tomorrow at I
Tomorrow.
think 10 a.m. Mountain, noon Pacific, noon Eastern. So yeah, it should be. It's always an exciting day to see, even for the teams. Even if your team isn't super active, it's always exciting to see. I mean, some big names on the board.
Yeah.
Malkin potentially.
Johnny
Giroux is out
Gaudreau
there. Johnny
still
Hockey. Like,
still not signed by the Calgary Flames, even though like
yeah,
I heard a rumor like they were offering him up to like 8 years of like 9.5 million or
yeah,
something, and like
I heard that he was not hadn't signed like an 8-year offer, and it's crazy. But I mean, you can't blame some of these guys for
yeah,
seeing, especially when you see what some of the contracts already have been.
yeah,
The Avs gave a pretty lucrative contract to Valerie Nichushkin,
I
so
heard that.
you can tell. I mean, these guys are like, hey, I wonder what somebody might offer me.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean he wouldn't take an offer from Calgary in the end, but
yeah.
you might want to see if somebody's willing to go crazy and be like, "We'll give you 10 years at 9 million." Well, I guess they actually there's a limit. Like there's a benefit to re-signing with the team you're with is that you can take an extra year. So my
Uh,
understanding is that like Calgary is the only team that could offer him 8. The
uh,
most anybody else could do would be 7,
7. All right.
um, which I think I forget what the name. There was like I think that rule's in place now because it was like a collectively bargained thing because like there was some goalie who got like a like a 12-year deal or something stupid, and it ended up just being like, "Okay, we need to put some kind of
So
limit on this." 'Cause
shenanigans. Yeah,
yeah, it was. It was like there's no way he's gonna play for even like he's gonna retire way before that happens, and like
yeah.
because he wasn't that young of a goalie. I'll have to look into that, see who that was. Do
There's
some
I think among the Kraken podcasts I listen to, there's like this faint glimmer of hope that we might pick up. Try to I'm sure we'll send an offer. We'll talk to Johnny Gaudreau. I mean, whether or not, I mean, it seems unlikely that he'd want to come to Seattle unless he really wants to
you know,
join a building franchise. But
the name I have heard bandied around with Seattle recently is Nazem Kadri.
well,
There's a lot of talk that Kadri might go there.
I've heard Burakovsky too, just because I think he is a little bit younger potentially, and maybe wouldn't require maybe as much money, and so like that. I
Yeah,
don't
oh
know,
yeah,
like
he'd be a cheaper sign
yeah,
for sure.
I think the Kraken have good cap space. So like the question would be, you try to go for like one big name and try to get a couple small, or do you try to get like maybe a couple like medium names to kind of really fill out the roster for next year? So we'll see. This section is probably taking more time than we'd initially intended, but
Right, true. That
yeah,
always happens with the NHL stuff.
yeah.
All right, well, let's transition then. Kenobi. We got excited for a fake trailer about this like 2 years ago. Now it's
I rickrolled
finally
you
here.
guys.
Ah.
It's finally out. It's
Oh
finally
god.
done. 6 episodes. If you haven't seen it, probably you ought to wait on this podcast unless you don't care because we're gonna go fully into it. So spoilers from here on out. You
Spoiler
have been
alert.
spoiler alert. Just to give a super quick rundown, we're set about 10 years after the events of Attack of the Clones. Obi-Wan is in hiding for like the last 10 years, literally like living in a cave, doing apparently nothing
Like a
for a
hermit.
decade. Like
Well, he was
work,
stalking Anakin for a while, or
stalking,
stalking Luke for a while.
stalking Luke and working in like some kind of weird like packaging plant in the middle
Yeah,
of
metal
the yeah.
packaging
I
thing.
didn't
Yeah.
know what that
Smiley,
was
can we get
about, but
some
yeah,
context really quickly during the? You
sure.
said 10 years after Attack of the Clones. Was that is that one of the video games, or is that
No, Attack. Oh, I'm what
Is that Revenge of the Sith? Is that what?
Clone
Revenge
Wars.
All
of
right,
the Sith.
all right.
Sorry.
I was
Revenge
like,
of the
wait,
Sith.
what is this? Is this like another piece I don't remember?
No, I don't know
all
what
right,
I'm talking
all right,
about.
all right.
Yeah, sorry. Revenge of the Sith, episode 3, third movie, right?
All right.
And yeah, so then a bunch of stuff happens where he gets flushed out of hiding to rescue a little 10-year-old Princess Leia. Bail Organa calls him, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, gives us the famous line. A lot of callback lines in this series, I would say. A lot of familiar verbiage.
Yeah.
If you want to go that way. And a whole bunch of stuff ensues where Obi-Wan goes on a bunch of escapades and faces Darth Vader again multiple times, and in the end is able to defeat him and escape. And Leia and Luke remain preserved, safe, and still unbeknownst to Darth Vader, basically what you knew would have to happen because we kind of knew where episode 4 was going to place us. So that's the first thing I want to talk about with you guys is like, what do you think about shows like this that are so like restrained by what we know has to happen in the future? Like we know where the show has to end to set us up for episode 4. Very similarly to kind of how we did with um Rogue One. Rogue One kind of had a similar feel, which you knew what Rogue One's end was going to be to an extent, but because all those characters were unknown, their fates were still a little uncertain. It's like they could have just survived and gone on to different things that we just don't happen to see. I'm like, you didn't necessarily know how things were going to end, but like in this particular series, I felt like there's so much that was like you, you kind of there's a lot of the like what's the word I'm thinking of? Not like suspense is a little bit taken out. Like Obi-Wan's gonna make it. Luke's gonna make it. Leia's gonna like the only person whose fate was ever really in question was Riva, the Inquisitor, and like the other Inquisitors, like they were the only ones who you even and maybe some of these other rebels who are not rebels, whatever. I guess maybe they are the
Yeah,
beginnings
they
of the
are. They
rebellion.
were right. Yeah, part of
They
the
have like
rebellion.
part of the path or whatever.
Yeah.
Some of these maybe, but like all the major players, their fate is already determined for them. And so, do you feel like that took anything away from it? Did that change the way you enjoyed it or the way you felt about the show? I'll start with Van, just because I've been starting with Shy. I think.
I think you're spot on. I think it's hard to have those iconic moments that Star Wars is so good about, like the Luke, I am your father, and everybody getting thrown back and all that stuff. Like it's hard to have those moments when you already know what the outcome is. I think what you can look forward to is how did we end up in these situations that we are, or how do you get out of situations that we currently find ourselves in? So specifically like the Obi-Wan and Vader fights, right? And you're like, oh man, they are going hard in the paint. Like it's a great fight scene, by the way, and they're going back and forth. Except I hate that it kept getting interrupted by the cutscene over to Riva and Uncle Owen, and then back to the fight scene again, which is just like completely ruining the rhythm. But anyway, that fight scene was really awesome. And then you're like, okay, well, we know Vader lives, so how does this end? And if we want to talk about that part, I know we're kind of going straight to the end. Like I don't know. I was left unfulfilled and bothered by that final fight scene. The fight scene was choreographed very well. It was beautifully done. It was spectacular. I thought it looked really good. I know Shy's huge on choreograph and all that stuff, so I'd like to hear his opinion on that. But like the end, he slices now Darth Vader's helmet in half, and we get to see Hayden Christensen. We get to see Hayden in there, and
Hayden.
it's like Obi-Wan just says, "I'm sorry I failed you," admits that it was his fault, and then just walks away. After this guy is like the most notorious Sith still now and at this time, and he already made this mistake once when he left him burning on whatever planet that was at the end of episode 3
Yeah.
on Mustafar, and it's like you're gonna go and make the same exact mistake again, and so I wanted to know, okay, how do they end this? Like, what happens? What comes between them where Vader gets away? And what it was it was just Obi-Wan saying, "Hey, dude, I'm sorry I let you down, deuces," and walks away.
That was definitely. I saw a lot of like that. Seems to be the biggest complaint I've actually seen with the series was the how that how it's like, wow, like this dude's a mass murderer. You know he's gonna go on to continue to like fulfill the Empire's evil mechanic. Like you're it's kind of the old morality question, like, if you have the ability to stop a crime from committed, don't you have a responsibility to do that? Like, if you just step back and let somebody murder something, aren't you a little bit culpable for that? And, like, there's an element that there where it's like, you're just gonna let this like, you're not even gonna try to, like, bring him into, like, some kind of
Right.
justice or something, like, you're just gonna be like, "Peace," like you said.
Dude, you know he's always going to be a threat to Leia. You know he's always going to be a threat to Luke, and
Yeah,
yet you just walk away. These are the two people that you are like going to protect, have to protect the most, and that you are very cognizant that this is what you have to do, and yet
yeah,
you let the person who can do them harm the most just walk away.
that's a
And
great
like,
point. It's
is there
not even
something
like
else to that? Like, is Obi-Wan incapable of killing him for some reason? Like, I don't understand.
I wanna let Shy jump in here, but that's what I think I've seen the biggest rationale for it is that it's like it's just that he couldn't do it. Is that like especially seeing his face there, like that
Mm,
even though he says that
mm,
my friend is truly dead, that like he just didn't have the heart to like murder it is still Anakin in his mind, even though he's trying to like pretend it's not. But
yeah.
Shy?
Yeah. I liked the show. The last episode was my least favorite part of the show. And it's sad because I've seen people say they think it's the best episode. And I mean, it had the potential to be the best episode, but it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly for what you said, Smiley. And then leading into what you're talking about, Van, is like, I think the two big climaxes of that episode were supposed to be the fight between Vader and Obi-Wan. And then that chase, the chase where Reva's chasing Luke into the wilderness. And both times, you know what happened. Like, you know how it plays out. And it's just, I felt like so much of the rest show had stakes, and it wasn't even because I was worried about Obi-Wan dying, but I was just really interested in seeing what happened. And I think you bring up a great
Yeah.
example of like Rogue One. I thought Rogue One did it great, where it was like, we're gonna deal with some source material, we're gonna like stitch it like at the end points to known lore, but you don't know anything about what's gonna happen in the rest of the film, and
Yeah.
experience a brand new story. And I really liked that about Rogue One, and so I really enjoyed the show up until that episode. Not that I hated that episode, but it just felt like I felt bored almost during like, because like you're right, Van, the fight scene was pretty cool, but like I was just like, there's no weight or impact here. They're both walking
For
away
sure.
from this, so I don't really care. Oh, Obi-Wan's getting buried by a bunch of boulders. He gets out, obviously. Like he just sliced Vader's face, and it was weird. What's funny is where I went with it, and it's more of almost like a fate, maybe like force approach, and not that everyone would know this, but like I guess the whole time when he didn't kill Vader, I'm like, obviously they were constrained by the fact that Vader survives, but I mean, I kept going back to the idea of like, obviously by not killing Vader, in the end Vader helps kill the Emperor, right? So it's almost like it's like one of those
Mm,
things where like you don't know.
mm.
I don't, you just never know like how actions will play out. So like, yeah, maybe killing him would have saved thousands or even millions of other people, but ultimately would it have saved the galaxy if the Emperor still survived in the end, or maybe he would have died some other way. You can't really mind game that kind of stuff, but
Yeah, I think what would you guys have thought if they'd have put some kind of wild twist in there? Like, what if and I literally just made this up on the spot. Like, what if be, like Obi-Wan had died in that fight? Like, what if they had kind of structured the show a little bit more and he had given more information? You remember that like charlatan dude who's like pretending to be a Jedi? Like
Yeah.
what if I mean, it wouldn't have worked. Like, it wouldn't have worked for so many reasons, but, like, what if they had somehow gotten some kinda twist where Obi-Wan had actually died and the old Ben was actually a different person, I don't know, someone who, like, carried on, like, his last will, which was, like, "You gotta protect Luke on Tatooine," or, like, I don't know, like the whole show would have had to be different to kind of set that up. But like,
yeah,
what if you would have gone? What if there would have been some kind of twist where you think the whole time? Well, I know that obviously he has to make it to episode 4, but maybe it turns out he doesn't. And like, there's some kind of crazy. Like, would that have made it better or worse in your opinion if they had tried to pull some kind of crazy twist like that?
Yeah, I
Like,
don't I don't know how I would feel about that. Part of it might be like heresy. Like how dare you do this to
right?
what we know is canon?
Yeah.
Um, and you're clearly just trying to do this for shock value and blah that stuff. So yeah, I think it feel kind of farcical.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't have been happy with that twist. I wish there was something that was surprising at the end of the show, but not that.
Mm,
Not
Yeah, I
that.
mean, I think like it felt like the main twist was that, oh, Riva was a youngling, which like
right,
everybody figured out.
right,
Like the first scene is the little girl who's a youngling being like,
right,
it's like it was really easy to make that connection.
right.
Like it would have been a bigger twist if she wasn't that youngling. And it was just like, no, those was just some younglings. Like those actually had nothing to do with the story. That would have been a bigger twist than finding out she was a youngling. But I also want to make a point too, Van. You know, you said that you felt like it cutting back and forth away from the fight was really distracting, but that is, if you go back and watch every other Star Wars movie, that's 100% on brand
Yeah,
for. Like, I think the only fight that actually doesn't really do that is the final fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin in
yeah,
episode 3, 'cause I can't think of what else they'd be cutting to, but you think of, like, Empire Strikes Back is cutting back between Luke and Vader and,
yep,
Leia and Chewie trying to catch Han and Boba Fett.
yep.
Um, you
I
know,
have
all of them, even, you know,
A
the
New
first
Hope. You're with Queen Amidala, and then
I have a
they're
push. Yeah. No.
yeah,
Sean.
they're in there fighting Darth Maul, and you're
Yeah, the
cutting
Darth
back and forth
Maul one
between
is constantly
the
cutting back and
yeah,
forth.
right.
Maybe Rey and Kylo, but even that, they're cutting back to Poe and them trying to shoot the place down,
I think how
potentially. I don't know.
I think how the original trilogy did it well though was I think like I think of like what was it, I think either Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back, like with the fight scene where I think it was Empire Strikes Back when he's fighting gets it and then they end up going outside and he gets his hand cut off. Like a lot of those cuts are like they're like in pauses of the fight. Like he falls
That
down
is
a
true.
catwalk and then they cut something else and then they
Yeah.
cut back and I think that's maybe I don't know, like maybe a lot if we went back and watched, a lot of Star Wars again, maybe a lot of the fight scenes would feel more disjointed
Well, yeah,
because like you're saying, it's in the middle of a
No,
fight scene, it's like cut to like another thing. Um
that's a great point. That's a great point. If you think about Battle of the Fates in episode 1, episode episode even A New Hope, as kind of Van was saying, like when Obi-Wan and Vader are fighting, like the pauses tend to be when like they kind of pull back and talk shit to each other a
I
little
meant the
bit.
Phantom Menace, but yeah, I
Oh,
said A
you
New Hope.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
because
you're
like it
that's
was
right.
Darth Maul and Queen Amidala,
Yeah,
but you're right. It was when the gates come up and they
gates
sit down to
close and stuff.
meditate.
Yeah,
Bam, cut cut over
you're
to Queen
right.
Amidala with her
That's
blaster. Yeah,
that's a great point, Shy. A
or
lot of
yeah,
those breaks were natural pauses in the fight and not just like mid sword swing.
dude.
So maybe that's why
yeah.
you felt it was disjointed here and not
Yeah,
elsewhere. That's something I hadn't
yeah.
even really considered. So fair enough.
Deborah
Plus, just the
Chow, man.
nostalgia of seeing them fighting again. Like, I just wanted to see that again. Like, it was just so awesome.
It
Because,
was cool,
like,
pulling out some of the old moves too, like some
yeah,
of the, you know,
I
melty.
like when he summoned all the rocks and he just starts blasting Vader with them. It's very reminiscent of Vader being on the ship and just yanking everything he can and throwing all that stuff. Yeah,
Um. All right. What about one of the other big feedback pieces I think from the show that people brought up was that was really dark in places, right? That like, I think the part that really jumped out, I think, to a lot of audiences was episode 3, where Vader's walking through the streets and is just like force choking kids and stuff. And like why it felt more visceral than like, I mean, when you think about the other stuff he's done, like, yes, he slaughtered
blowing
the
up planets.
younglings, but like a lot of that was off screen, right? Like you didn't see him really cutting down the little kids. It was igniting the lightsaber, and then we cut to a different scene, right?
Yeah.
It's
Same with
implied.
the Sand People, right? Like,
Yeah,
there's a little bit of a fight,
there's a
but then
little
like,
bit, but
yeah,
yeah. He tells us that he killed the women and the children, but we don't actually see that part. We only see him killing, the men. And the same thing,
yeah,
even with the force choking. Like when he force chokes those dudes out on the star destroyers, like those are grown ass men, and they're kind of evil bureaucratic captains and like
yeah.
douchebags anyway. So we don't really feel that bad for them. Like they're bad guys choking bad guys, right? But, like innocent kids in the street like getting choked out. People just kind of reacted to that. It was like, damn, like that's pretty crazy. And like it was, I think, well received to an extent because it felt like this is what you expect from Darth Vader to an extent. Like this is why he's such a villain. But What did you think about some of those scenes? Like, did it jump out to you at all, or is this more stuff the internet talked about that you didn't really notice? Either of you, or
Yeah,
neither?
I think for me it solidified. It was the other part of the equation where I always knew Vader was evil because I was always told Vader was evil, and then of course I saw some of the heinous acts he did and you know throughout the movies, but um it it really brought to the forefront me physically seeing him be evil to say, okay, I know he's evil, and therefore he is acting in that way too. That I can finally connect the synapses in my head to marry this concept that yeah, this guy's fucking nasty, and he's a bad guy. He's not just some crazy dude. He's not some Lord Helmet from Spaceballs. Like
The same
he's a
episode
bad
too,
dude.
he's like, putting Obi-Wan in the fire, burning him,
Oh,
and he's like
dude, he grabs lights the place on fire, pulls him back. How do you like it? Oh man. Yeah, it was pretty gnarly.
What'd you think, Shy?
No, I mean I agree with Van completely. I think it reinforced that image, and I think like a lot of things, like I liked the show. I want to emphasize that it's not perfect by any means, but I did like the show, and I think one thing I liked was they didn't make Vader a badass by giving him a double bladed lightsaber or having him like flip
Right.
and spin or whatever. They made like it felt more old school, like the methodical, like
Yeah.
ominousness. That street scene, the scene where he grabs that transport with the force
Oh,
and like holds
so
it like,
good.
and just like there's just these like it's slow paced and ominous. It's weird because when I watched it, I didn't I guess catch that he force choked a kid. I remember like at one point he pulls a woman I think through a window or something and like or her husband and she's crying and he chokes her. I remember I remember being dark. I didn't remember there being a kid being choked out, but
I think he was like a teenager, but yeah,
I mean
it seemed like
my struggle, and this should be a whole different episode, and I think Van kind of promised that we'll have an episode like this at some point, but having just watched the most recent Marvel movie Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, like that movie struck me as much darker, as far as like compared to its original source material, like Marvel films versus this compared to other Star Wars films. So maybe that's jaded my viewpoint a bit, but yeah.
I have made no promises.
I,
In fact, I've
all I,
made the opposite of
all I remember
promises.
is the title of an episode called "The Stan Lee Cup," and the fact that we'd all have to watch all the Marvel
I forgot
films,
about
which
that.
Smiley and I
forgot
already
about that.
have.
You're right.
So you got some catch
You're
up
right.
to
yeah.
When the Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup, we'll do that episode.
do. I'm gonna clip that. It's happening. Oh man.
All right. Then the other thing I wanted to bring up was, and this isn't on our outline, so forgive me for going off book here, but whenever you get into these things that are in between canonical sources, you always run into maybe some inconsistencies and stuff. And we saw this a lot with the prequels, right? With like, boy, it seems like sometimes they have better technology in the prequels even than they do no here. Like, what's up with this, right? Like,
Why were they so
did
much
any
better
of
with lightsabers? Like hundreds of years,
yeah.
Yeah,
thousands of years.
they were also a lot younger, so
Oh.
And so like a couple of the ones that jumped out at me were, and so I want to just talk about things that you found either like that did what other stuff maybe bothered you about the show if there was anything. Some of the things that come to mind for me are, you know, the way that like Darth Vader, you referenced it before, reach out and grabs that ship and keeps it from going anywhere, and like that's what a cool move, right? It's kind of reminiscent of what Ray does in
right,
Episode 9, but
right,
like it was pointed out to me that like he has this power. This is 10 years prior to the original trilogy. And yet in the original trilogy, on multiple occasions, he watches starships just like blast off in front of him and he's kind of like acts like he's powerless to do anything. The prime example would be in Hoth, right? Where he
mm,
walks into the room and the Millennium Falcon's right there and he wants that ship. And like, this wasn't like, we'll let him get away. It was like, we're literally going to spend the rest of the movie hunting down this ship. And like, he couldn't have reached out his hand and just like he forgot how to do that. I forgot about that trick. I haven't done that in 10 years. Oh my god. Like it just seems kind of weird where it's like you give a guy a it's like did he de-level? Is this like he lost all his abilities at the beginning of the new trilogy and has to level back up like a video game or something? Like like those kind of things sometimes bother me a little bit, where it's like he knows how to do this. Why wouldn't he have done that? It's like you risk making people too cool in the past and then kind of giving some head scratchers later. I don't know. Maybe that didn't bother you guys that much.
It didn't bother me, but I mean, obviously Obi-Wan forgot how to use the Force, so we have we already
That's
have
what I was
the
gonna say.
explanation in the show. I mean,
Literally, he couldn't use. He had to remember. You started
It's
seeing
so
glimpses
weird.
of it. No, you did, right? Like
That was
you
so
started seeing
weird.
glimpses of it.
Uh,
Yeah,
But yeah, but and don't you think though? I mean, that makes more sense. If he's gone through. I thought that was one of the cool things about the show is that like the the traumatic experience it must have been for Obi-Wan, like the fall from being like a badass general, one of the most
General Kenobi.
esteemed
Yeah,
people in the entire galaxy. And it's like, okay, almost everybody I know is now dead. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't prevent it. I didn't see it. I basically have failed in every way. And now I'm just gonna like go into exile and like literally bury my head in the sand. Like what that kind of does to like you could understand that having a s- uh, psychological, thank you, effect on his like in how much of the force is about his mind over matter in the first place, right? Like it seems
yeah,
like that's everything we learn about from Dagobah, from the Dagobah scenes is it's all about your perception. It's about relearning how to think about things and like almost like believing it, right? Like you have to believe that the X-wing is no different than a stone
right.
that you can lift it. And so to me that made a lot of sense that he would have some kind of block because he was so traumatized from everything that happened. I didn't have a problem with that at all. I thought it was actually pretty humanizing. Anything
Yeah,
you guys thought that kind of felt
yeah. If we're
right?
talking about things that kind of bothered you or didn't make sense, um, in the first episode when Riva announces to Kenobi that, oh yeah, by the way, Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. I bet you didn't know that. And then Kenobi's like clearly just had this huge epiphany. You're supposed to believe this is the first time he's ever hearing this or inferring that this is possible. And that just seems completely impossible to me. Not only are they, able to feel when one another truly die or are still in existence or in around one another and all that. We see it multiple times when there's a disturbance in the force and all this stuff with people dying or not dying and all that. So not only are you using force to feel, but like you couldn't infer that shortly after you left Anakin to die, that all of a sudden this Darth Vader guy shows up and there's no way in hell that it's Anakin Skywalker who became Darth Vader. Like it just
Well,
seems so stupid to me.
yeah, I mean, didn't I think I'd have to go back and watch, but I'm pretty sure when he is watching, like when he and Yoda go back to Coruscant, he's watching the data tapes. Like he's watching where where he kneels down and Emperor says, "You will now be known as Darth Vader." Like maybe he
Hmm.
didn't
I
have
didn't
the
even
sound
remember that far
on,
back.
but like I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure that he like heard that name there. Like he would have known that, right? I
Yeah.
think.
But the
I
whole
agree.
thing, that whole part just seemed super
That's fair.
disconnected and
Uh,
weird and yeah,
and I
unrealistic.
guess I can kind of see like, okay, you've been living in the desert. You haven't been in touch with current events. Um, maybe you're too far away to feel that kind of thing. But I can understand like why that would bother you. What about you, Shaw? You got anything?
this was minor. Um, the I mean, this was another weird reveal or something. But like when Reva, like when Darth Vader takes her down, like after the transport escapes. Well, actually that whole scene. There were two issues I had. When Darth Vader grabs the transport and pulls it back down, and there's a transport behind the transport that takes off. Like what? Like they knew that they were going to
Yeah.
take off, and he was going to grab the transport, and they're just like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll hide a transport behind the transport, and we'll take that. Like I don't I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe it just happened to be two transports. Like, well, let's take the farther one because they might shoot it. That we use as a shield. Well, no, because someone obviously took it off. Someone took off in that train.
Well,
Yeah,
it
I
could have
don't
been a
know.
droid, right? Because
That whole
droids take off.
like maybe
Droids can fly
that whole
Yeah.
aircraft.
scene.
Very
That whole
very
scene.
elaborate plan for
So and then right afterwards, Darth Vader. Then Darth Vader and Reva have a confrontation, and all of a sudden the Inquisitor that she thought was dead shows up,
Yeah, that
and
she
he makes some comment about like I forget what it was, but it really bothered me. I should remember this because it really bothered. He says something as if as if she was blind and should have known he was alive, like he didn't die or something, or like how like his will made him come back for revenge or some totally pointless line. And I'm like,
He said revenge, something like revenge is a great motivator to staying alive or something like that.
something
Yeah.
like I don't know. I was like, why does any of this matter? And like, it is not a
So
big twist. I don't.
Hmm,
Uh,
yeah. So I think everybody. Well, I mean, everybody knew that dude was alive anyway because he shows up in the what's the Star Wars Rebels, which is
no.
set after this. And I guess there's actually some lore there, like his species was known to actually have two stomachs. So the fact that he
hmm.
was stabbed in the stomach, actually, he has 2 stomachs anyway, so it's not quite as bad, I guess. And obviously, being stabbed in the stomach by a lightsaber is not a fatal wound because we saw it 3 different times in that series. Because that's how Reva was stabbed as a child. That's how Reva was stabbed as an adult, and that's how the Inquisitor was stabbed. None of them didn't even really seem to slow Reva down. Like she got stabbed in the stomach with a lightsaber, and it's just like, all right, I'm gonna go hunt. I'm just go beat some kids down in Tatooine now. Like I'm cool. Like yeah, that I will say that kind of part did bother me. Like and two, it's like why? Like hold on a second. So you stabbed her in the stomach once before when she was a child and she
Right.
lived. You stabbed her now. She stabbed someone in the stomach who lived. But you're just gonna leave her there to live, I guess. Like you know she's gonna survive that. Like why even do it if you like?
That was gonna be my other
like
comment too. Is just people not dying,
yeah,
like Darth Vader not being more like pissed and kill hungry with Riva is just beyond me. Why he has such a high tolerance for her, I have no idea. Considering he death chokes other people for just looking at him wrong or questioning him wrong or something like that. Riva literally tried to kill him. Tried to kill him.
yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, well, you're gonna get a lightsaber through the stomach, which I know is not gonna kill you." Instead of like a decapitation or a body I don't it just I don't know why
I
he
mean, there's a
she
long
fails him multiple times, and he's okay with that, which normally nobody can fail him. You get instantly death, choke, force choked if you fail him. She fails him multiple times and then says, "Oh, no, no, it's okay. I put a tracker on." Oh, okay, well that's actually a pretty good idea. And then, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to try to kill you." Oh, okay, well you failed me and you tried to kill me, but instead of actually knowing that I'm going to kill you, I'm just going to poke you in the stomach. Like so stupid. She should be obliterated in this universe, if she's not.
I think there's a long history across all sorts of series and media and stuff of um, bad guys not finishing the job when they have the chance. But like, yeah, it seemed really obvious here, where it's just like, what are we doing here? Like the plot armor is just too strong. It's like you know,
And it seems
it's
like maybe she had to live so that she could change her image, and that's the only reason why she had to live. I don't know.
to me
I don't know.
it's the same
Mm.
it's the same beef I have with a lot of again in all media like meaningless fake out deaths. Right? Like, I just think it's so
Mhm.
cheap. It's like if you want to evoke the emotional response of having somebody die, then kill them and have there be some
Right.
stakes to it, and don't just bring them back to life,
Oh, I love
like
steaks.
the I know you do. Of
After
course you
you
said
kill them. Yeah,
yeah,
just
well,
make some
like, I mean,
steaks.
like, the whole Chewie thing in Episode 9 where "Oh, he's
Yeah,
dead." Oh, no, he was on a different transport that you didn't see, cool.
right.
Just these cheap fake outs, and, like, that's what this is. It's like, we're gonna make it like, "Oh, you're gonna die, but you're not really gonna die because we wanna do another scene with you." Like, there was just a little too much of that in this show for me, and it kinda goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like, "Oh, she's gonna chase Luke through the desert," but, like, is Luke gonna be okay? I think he probably will. Like something tells me. And so again, it does come down to just like not enough consequential things. And like I think Vader killing her there and that being the end of her arc might have been more interesting and more satisfying. And like
I
it would have
agree.
been like, oh, that's kind of sad. Like it's
Yep,
sad. Like what a sad story of a poor girl who was
yep.
trying to be a Jedi and had this terrible experience and was consumed by revenge. and it ultimately fell short. Wasn't strong enough to carry out her need for revenge,
Yeah,
and got
and that
squished
just
by
makes
Vader.
Vader that much more badass and
Yes,
and hateful and like,
yeah,
man, yeah,
yeah. It seems like a missed opportunity. Like, you could have done without the whole Luke or the whole Riva and Lars and
Tatooine.
Beru
Yeah.
thing. Like, I could have done without that. I really could
yeah,
have.
Well, that whole
100%.
scene had no weight because we already knew what would happen. Like
Right.
I've heard people say, and I think they have a good point, that this could have been a movie. Like, of the six, probably not even 6 hours, because I think the episodes were 40 to 50 minutes long each. So I mean, you're really talking almost 5 hours. Like, if you cut 2.5 to 3 hours of fat from that, you have a nice 2 to 2.5 hour movie, and probably really engaging and exciting, because you take the
Yeah.
interesting points and put them together, and maybe change some transitions, and a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff we've talked about you could just pull out. You could pull out that fight between Vader and Obi-Wan, no matter how cool it was, and maybe Obi-Wan's really just running from Vader the whole movie, right? And like, it's not until New Hope that they kind of face off again, and maybe maybe even just remove Reva. I don't know. Maybe it becomes a story really of Obi-Wan hunting down Princess Leia and saving her, and then like their kind of adventure trying to get back to Alderaan.
So that's something I
But
want to talk to you guys about. Have either of you played Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order?
No.
So one thing I have it. I just went on. It's been on my wish list for a while on Steam, and it went on sale for like 60% off about maybe a month ago. And so I picked it up and I started playing it, and it's set like 5 years before this. So it's like halfway between end of episode 3 and this. And what I've heard and what I've seen a little bit, like, I'm not super far into it, but I guess the plot of that game actually very closely mirrors the plot of this game. It's a different female inquisitor, but like, it's kind of her arc and Reva's arc are basically the same. That she was a former Padawan who was let down by the Jedi, not specifically Obi-Wan and Anakin, but more just the Jedi in general. Like, didn't save her, let her be taken by the Sith and trained into an Inquisitor and all this stuff. And so, like, I thought that was super interesting that they kind of pulled. And I don't know how. I have to assume that if you're making a Star Wars IP, you're very well aware of the other IP
Yeah.
and plot lines that exist. So I think it's interesting that they almost took what was the plot, like a plot theme from one of the recent games, and turned it into, and like co-opted that into the show. Um, like, it's literally like, so Riva was the 3rd sister, like, it's literally the 2nd sister who has, like, an identical plot line. Like, if you assume they're both canon, it's really kinda weird that
Hmm.
they just, like, retold the same story in a way. Um, Been a cool game so far. Like I said, I'm not super into it. I haven't had a whole lot of time to play it, but, it seems pretty cool.
sounds like Smiley's got to get some Focus Target podcast streaming going again of him playing
Yeah,
Fallen
I
Order.
should. That would be a good one to stream. You're right. That's fair.
I think I was well, yeah.
I've heard good things about it. Isn't that the Dark Souls style, like, Star Wars
It
game?
is.
Yeah,
It is,
I
yeah,
heard it
it's
was
a
good.
little, it's kinda like an action adventure, and, I mean, it looks really good, it runs really nice on the, it's a pretty game, and it's got a, I don't know, this isn't a fallen o this isn't a Disconnect
We're not
Drive podcast,
sponsored by LucasArts.
get there another time, but, I've enjoyed it a little bit so far. I was playing it a
PC
lot before
gamers
Flu
with an Amazon Prime subscription can now get their hands on Jedi Fallen Order for free. Maybe I'll check it out. Oh, the caveat is you need to be a Prime customer. Well, okay.
didn't it say
This is
Prime
also
members?
not.
Yeah.
This is also not a Prime.
Why is that very
I wonder if that's
circular?
part of Prime Day, because today's Prime Day. I wonder if that's a limited deal.
It is Prime Day.
This is not an Amazon commercial. We're way off the rails.
Alright, final question I have, and then I'll open it to you guys if you guys have anything else you want to discuss, but what were your thought on the characters themselves? I mean, we've got Obi-Wan, we've got Vader, who are both very well known. Like, little Luke, little Leia, we saw a little bit of Owen and Beru, and then of course the new characters. We have that girl whose name I forget now, who was on who kind of helped them throughout the
Mm.
show. We have Riva and
Yeah,
the
the
other
officer girl.
Inquisitors, the officer.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you guys think of them? What were your? Do you think they did justice to these recurring characters and the new characters, or just any thoughts about the overall, kind of casting everything? What do you think about Hayden Christensen coming back as Vader? Things like that.
I mean, I loved the member berries. I loved seeing, you know, uh, Ewan McGregor and Christian Haydenson again. Um, yeah, that was awesome. I've heard mixed opinions, very polarizing opinions on almost all the characters.
Hmm.
Like young Leia, people saying like, "Oh, she's too abrasive. She has way too much like what's the word? Not analytical think, but like military strategy think and all that stuff for at her for her age and all those things." And I'm like, I can write all that stuff off because she becomes a military officer like to lead the rebellion. Like clearly, she's just born with this ability to make good decisions and to see the future and predict it.
And you remember that like she's only like 18 in the movies, right? So
Sure,
like,
yeah, that's a good point.
and like she's already like basically the heart of the rebellion at that
Right.
point. Like, you're right. Like she's obviously a prodigy. I never felt that way
Yeah.
Yeah.
about her. Like I never thought that she was too old for her age or too like I thought that was if I had to think about what she was like as a 10-year-old, I feel
Yeah.
like that pretty
Oh,
much matches what I would have expected. Yeah.
I
and
think
like the attitude and snootiness, she was exactly what I would expect a young lady to be. 100%.
I think people underestimate like the power of like high end tutoring too, right? Like I mean, kids who are
Oh,
basically
sure.
royalty, like that's like what I mean. Alexander the
Oh,
Great, when he was young at a young age, wasn't he already like conquering nations basically? Like yeah, I mean that's just like these people who like grow up with like the resources if they take advantage of it, right? I mean, obviously some people grow up and are lazy or just don't care, but I think driven. She was my favorite character, and the most
yeah.
unexpected
I
because I
loved
didn't.
her.
I guess I didn't really watch a lot. I don't know if she was even really in a lot of the promotional material. Maybe I didn't watch promotional material, but like when
Yeah.
I don't think
No,
she was in
she
any
was.
of it.
like when the
Yeah,
I had
none
plot
of it.
took
no idea.
yeah
Yeah.
when the plot took that shift, I'm like, oh, that's all right, young Leia. All right, this is interesting. We'll see her for a couple minutes, and then I'll move back on Obi-Wan. And like, oh no, this is gonna be like a buddy movie between like Leia and I'm like they were my two favorite characters, Obi-Wan and
Oh, I
Princess
loved
Leia,
it. Yep.
and I really I thought they both. I love watching Ewan McGregor play Obi-Wan, and I thought they cast Leia perfectly, and I thought like she just played to a T what a young sassy Leia would be like at that age. Like it was
That
ridiculous.
was absolutely the twist because all the promotional material was of young Luke. Young
Mm,
Luke,
Hmm.
like
mm,
you
Yeah.
thought it was gonna maybe be Ben and Luke because like you did kind of get the feeling in episode 4. It felt like Leia didn't know Ben Kenobi, which is, I guess, is another one of those consistency things where it's like, yeah, that throwaway line that we gotta pretend we don't know each other to keep each other safe. But like,
what?
I think you kind of felt like it was like General Kenobi, you served my father in the Clone Wars. Like I'm
Oh yeah.
like there wasn't really a personal tie there.
Mm.
Whereas like Luke is kind of like, wonder if he means old Ben. Like
Yeah.
it sounds like he kind of knew him a little bit, like
Yeah.
not
Knew of
super well, but
him.
like yeah,
Yeah.
the scene that maybe they had some interaction, and they
Right.
of course they do at the very end. But
Right.
um, yeah, like I think it was
But same
a
thing with
total
Leia though.
twist.
Like it really so it made sense why in the beginning of A New Hope you have her saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope." Like they garnished this friendship together
Yeah,
via this series, and it
yeah.
really
I thought
solidified
they
it.
set that up well enough. What about you,
I think
Sean?
so
You
too. I
maybe
liked
have
it.
some
Did
there.
he? Well, because you're right. It was you helped my father. I remember there being something about like I thought it was like you helped the family, but you're right. It was you helped my
It was
father.
like you served
But
my father in the
yeah,
Clone Wars.
I can't remember. Did they hug though? The first time that Obi-Wan and Leia see each other, does she hug
They
him?
never she never sees no. The only
Oh,
time
he dies
they never
before.
interact.
Yeah,
The
because
only time
he
he
breaks
sees Kid,
off. She's when he's done. Yeah, right. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
which that
Never
was
mind.
something that people did kind of complain about. That's like if you knew this guy and you loved him, and like he just got cut down in front of
Yeah.
your eyes, and you're just like, but like the other argument to that is like she also just watched her entire planet blow up,
Yeah.
and she's obviously like we assume that she's kind of putting her grief to the side for all of this,
Yeah.
like and focusing on the battle, and then probably in the off screen post credits when she has time to decompress, she is going to grieve all the people she
Yeah.
lost, which is literally like everyone she knows.
Which I mean,
Um,
if you're a
uh,
general, I mean, you have to learn how to
yeah,
do that, right? Like that's a key component of
Yeah.
leadership is like learning to kind of
yeah,
like use your emotions. Like, all right, I know we're kind of getting lower on time, but I wanna.
yeah,
One of my biggest disappointments. So not talking about likes or not likes, but kind of like I think we could talk a little bit about maybe like what could they have done better, or what maybe do you
mhm.
wish that you'd seen more,
But
and
you were hoping for a lot from
yeah,
this series. I think. Yeah,
yeah, and so well, and I'm saying, and what I'm actually gonna say is actually it came during the series. Like it wasn't even like coming into it, but like early on, it's almost like one of the first scenes there's like, oh no, a friend of mine corrected me on this. It's at the end of I think episode 3 or something. Because isn't there a scene where like Obi-Wan kind of like connects with Yoda again or something? Right, like you were talking about, like they're out. And like, what doesn't Yoda tell him? Like, I need to tell you, I've learned how to like communicate with your old master or something like that, or like.
Oh yes, in the third. I thought when you said episode 3,
not episode 3 of the show. Episode 3 movie. The movie. Yeah, the movie. Yeah.
Yes, basically the last scene that Yoda has in that movie is, I will teach you to commune with Qui-Gon Jinn.
So like early on in the show, he's like kind of, it's almost like praying almost to be like, Master, I'm doing this or whatever, and you don't, I guess, really know. I don't know. Like part of me's like, well, is he seeing him? But we just can't see him. Like, are we? Like, this is kind of lame. And then like 5 minutes left in the whole series, he's walking away the desert, and Qui-Gon shows up. I'm like, Qui-Gon is like, oh, it's about to end. Okay.
I did like that Liam Neeson got at least a cameo. I was very
happy about that. Yeah. Oh man,
would have been cool to have more. I agree. That would be sweet. But it did make sense, right? That he's like, you kind of assume after the way episode 3 ends that he's gonna be chit-chatting with Qui-Gon the next 20 years. But like, it does make sense that like he's like, that's not where he was at the beginning of the show, right? Like if he's having trouble, to Van's point earlier, he's having trouble like using the Force at all. Like if he was able to talk to Qui-Gon, you'd think he would have had a lot more perspective already. Like like I thought I was all right. I do see what you say though. I could have used some more Qui-Gon.
I didn't think it was a plot hole. It made me sad. I wish we'd seen more Qui-Gon. But
I think everybody wants more Qui-Gon. Like, I don't know if there's anybody I'd ever talk to who would say, no, let's have less Qui-Gon.
One of the best Jedi ever, without a doubt.
Yeah.
What about you, Van? Anything you want to touch on before we wrap this up today?
Nope. I think we're good.
All right. I guess then, so, my final question for you then, since we have an extra couple minutes, is, Kenobi, I think, was like one of the real like Star Wars stories that we kind of been hearing about for a while, like an Obi-Wan spit-off talking about this time frame is kind of what I think a lot of Star Wars fans were clamoring for as far as additional content. Now that it's done, like, what would you say? Is there anything that you can think of that you would like to see? Like what's the we talked about this with the Matrix a couple of weeks ago. Like, if they made another Matrix movie, what would you want to be about? So if like they're going to make another Star Wars series, they're going to keep kicking these things out. What's on your list of things you want to see in the Star Wars universe? Like, are you ready to go completely away from everything we know and start focusing on new characters, new events, or is there still something tied to this kind of Skywalker saga that you would like to see explored further?
That sounds like a really, really good ruined question of the day.
Ooh.
Okay, well maybe we'll table it. So we'll just tease the audience.
So then I got a question. That's a pretty quick answer, because then we don't need to get into discussion here. Is now that we mentioned how we said a lot of critical things, probably not as many flattering things, but just want to know where everybody stands on a scale of 1 to 10. If you could just give a number, I think that would be a nice final way to exit our conversation here. I personally enjoyed it. I didn't think it was the greatest series in the world. I'm glad they kept it to one season, at least as we know so far. I'm sure there's going to be a Reva spinoff, but they kept it down to one. So I would put it at like probably a 7 out of 10. So
that's when you asked the question, that was the number that popped into my head. My initial thought was 7, because I agree. I liked it. I thought it was good. It kept my attention. I wanted to know what happened. I thought a lot of the scenes were well done and were fun. Like, it wasn't. I can't go higher than that because of some of the things that I just felt were. Like, I think the biggest thing that Shai said earlier on, like the stakes just weren't there in too many of the critical scenes, you know. And like, there was also some point, like we didn't even talk about, like when they're fighting in that hangar, and like the dudes are just standing there in the open shooting, and like, I know stormtroopers can't hit anything, but like,
right,
come on,
or the guys
like,
not being able to, the two
here?
grown adults not being able to run down a 5-year-old Organa.
Oh yeah, the forest chase. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That was funny though, because like I think about like if I tried to chase a 5-year-old, how well I would
Through
do.
a forest.
I don't think I could catch. I don't know. I don't know, man. But you think these are like actual people who are in shape and like do this kind of thing for a living, kidnappings and stuff like. That's
And
a
it could be
fantastic.
druggies too, and they might be horrible at it. You know, I mean, you never know with
Maybe
that
you're
kind
right.
of.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah.
So 7 from Van, 7 from me. Shy, what's your number?
Well, it's no Independence Day, but I think
True.
I thought 7.5 immediately as well because yeah, I enjoyed it, but it was flawed, and honestly, I probably won't ever watch it again. And so something that I enjoy but probably won't watch again. Oftentimes, that is in the 7 or 8 range. Probably more 7. Yeah.
As a little aside, it's funny that so Sarah has we don't have a lot of time to watch anymore like we used to. Like we have literally no time to watch. Like we can't even get through the Marvel shows. And so she's kind of like, I'm pretty much done with Star Wars. It's just too much. Maybe we'll come back to it later, right? But I was like, you should when I saw the first one, I was like, you should at least watch the little bit because I thought that she would be totally into like the little Leia and everything. And like I thought maybe that would hook her in. And so we watched the first episode. I was like, what'd you think? And she's like, nah, not into it. And I was like, really? Like I thought cute little 10-year-old Leia
Yeah.
would get the job done, but
Little sassy pants.
she was like, not really into it.
She's getting her
So
kid fix now, so she doesn't need to
yeah,
watch
she's like,
another
I've
kid,
got
right?
my own child. Like he has to start with it. So yeah, that's probably what's up.
And he's
honestly.
way
But-
better.
yeah. Maybe that was it. So, all right. Well, we'll save that question of the day for next time. If you're listening to the podcast, ruminate on that. What do you want to see out of the Star Wars universe? If you want to send us some fan mail, if you want to send us something in advance, we can talk about your responses to that question of the day next week or 2 weeks from now, presumably when we do our next podcast, assuming all goes to plan. So, if you want to do that, focustargetpodcast@gmail.com would be the place to do so. So, thanks for being here for episode 117 of the Focus Target Podcast. I am your host, Captain Smiley.
I am one of the co-hosts, First Mate Shyrel.
I'm just Van. Appropriately cover us, Porkins. We're out.
Pork and spin off. Now we're talking.
Yeah, that's what I would watch.